In the cold silence of interstellar space, an enigma approaches. 3I Atlas. Neither comet nor asteroid, it defies cosmic understanding. On December 19th, it will pass within 8.5 million kilometers of Earth, closer than any interstellar object in history, 22 times the distance to the Moon, a sliver of space in astronomical terms. Astronomers track its trajectory at over 30 kilometers per second, while intelligence agencies watch with guarded suspicion. Beyond scientific wonder, this is about power. Governments prepare not for discovery, but dominance. The US mobilizes classified technologies in the Mojave Desert. China launches mysterious payloads rumored to intercept the object, and Russia readies for sabotage under the guise of Arctic military exercises. Amid this chaos, humanity's first contact could unravel into geopolitical disaster. The question isn't whether 3I Atlas is alien, but whether we're ready for its implications. Fear, greed, and mistrust threaten to overshadow December 19th, turning a historic moment into a display of unpreparedness. Telescopes from Chile to Hawaii fixate on the object, its faint glow a cosmic question mark. Satellites realign like chess pieces, and whispers of strategy echo through secure bunkers. This is no peaceful first contact. It's a race to claim something that belongs to all of us, and none of us. What follows is the story of how humanity's cosmic encounter could become our greatest failure or last chance for unity. Scientists trace the object's path under ancient starlight, while generals and diplomats focus not on the stars, but on each other. Radar arrays track the object's movements, as analysts in dimly lit rooms decipher its meaning. This duality between awe and suspicion is humanity's oldest story, now unfolding on a cosmic scale. Across the world, people gaze skyward, unaware of the silent drama playing out beyond their sight, as 3I Atlas draws ever closer. You're standing on the edge of something humanity was never meant to find. If that idea gives you chills, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment with your theory. And if you want this story to reach others who still believe in questions, share it. X, Facebook, Reddit, or your group chat. You're helping light up the dark. Thank you for being part of this. Section 1. The Alien in Plain Sight. 3I Atlas is only the third interstellar object observed in our solar system. The first, Oumuamua, was an enigma, its chaotic spin and unexpected acceleration defying explanation. Measuring just 400 meters long and 40 meters wide, Oumuamua's tumbling motion and non-gravitational acceleration sparked debates about its origins, with some even suggesting it could be an artificial object. The second, Borisov, behaved like a familiar comet, its icy nucleus and dusty coma resembling those of solar system comets. But 3I Atlas is different. Its nucleus ranges from 440 meters to 5.6 kilometers, but its size isn't the concern. Its chemistry is. Most comets are water ice with carbon monoxide and dust, reflecting their outer solar system origins. 3I Atlas, however, has a carbon dioxide-dominated coma with an 8.1 carbon dioxide to water ratio that defies conventional behavior. Its volatile profile is unlike anything we've catalogued in over 4,000 known comets. Simply put, 3I Atlas doesn't follow the rules. Its greenish coma, tinted by diatomic carbon, C2 emissions, glows eerily against the black of space, a beacon of its alien nature. Studies show 3I Atlas's outer layers bear the scars of galactic cosmic ray processing. Imagine an object drifting through interstellar space for millions of years, bombarded by high-energy particles traveling near the speed of light. These particles break down and rearrange surface molecules, creating a reddish spectral slope and a crust of irradiated material up to a meter thick. This means what we're observing on the surface may not reflect what's inside, a mystery buried beneath cosmic weathering. Observation. 3I Atlas is moving at 32 kilometers per second relative to the Sun, or over 115,000 kilometers per hour. Its hyperbolic trajectory confirms its interstellar origin and ensures it will exit our solar system before we can intercept it. Every day, it covers a distance equivalent to Earth's orbital radius, some 150 million kilometers. At this speed, it could traverse the distance from Earth to the Moon in just 20 minutes. 3I Atlas's behavior is also unusual. As it approaches the Sun, it outgasses at a steady rate, unlike typical comets that become more active with solar heat. This consistency suggests a more uniform internal composition, raising questions about its structure and origins. Its tail, stretching over 14 million kilometers, is a stark reminder of its constant, almost mechanical release of material. Speculation. What if 3I Atlas isn't just a comet? What if it's an interstellar probe, engineered by an unknown civilization? It could be designed to withstand interstellar space, powered by forces we don't understand, and programmed for a purpose we can't predict. This possibility challenges our understanding of the universe and our place in it. If 3I Atlas is more than a comet, it could redefine astronomy and humanity itself. Its trajectory, taking it toward the constellation Camelopardalis, could be a clue or merely a coincidence. Either way, it's a cosmic enigma, a visitor from the vast unknown, passing through our solar system on its endless journey through the cosmos. Section 2. The Exclusion Gambit. On December 20th, one day after closest approach, 3I Atlas will continue outbound on its hyperbolic trajectory. But something will happen during that closest approach. Maybe there will be a radio emission, a pulse of electromagnetic energy that defies natural explanation. Maybe the coma, the glowing envelope of gas and dust surrounding the object, will brighten in a pattern that doesn't match natural outgassing, flickering like a cosmic Morse code. Maybe nothing will happen, but the uncertainty will be enough. The possibility, however slim, that this object is more than just a silent interstellar traveler will ignite a chain reaction of fear, ambition, and geopolitical maneuvering. Enter the United States Space Force. Established in December 2019, its mandate is straightforward: space domain awareness and superiority. That means tracking every object in orbit, from the 33,000 pieces of debris larger than 10 centimeters to the 100 active satellites that form the backbone of modern communication, navigation, and surveillance. It means ensuring American access to space with a fleet of launch vehicles and spacecraft designed to deploy payloads, protect assets, and, if necessary, disrupt or destroy those of adversaries. When an interstellar object of unknown origin enters the neighborhood, space domain awareness takes on a whole new meaning. This isn't just about monitoring satellites or tracking orbital debris. This is about encountering the unknown, potentially the alien, and deciding who gets to define that encounter. The United States will declare a planetary defense perimeter around 3I Atlas's trajectory. They'll call it a strategic asset, invoking language normally reserved for nuclear weapons or critical infrastructure. They'll cite existing space law or creative interpretations of it, like Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty, which prohibits harmful contamination of celestial bodies, or Article 4, which forbids placing weapons of mass destruction in orbit. Or they might bypass the treaties entirely, leaning on brand-new executive orders written in the 72 hours after closest approach, when panic and speculation are at their peak. The reasoning will go like this. 3I Atlas is an unprecedented object with unknown properties and unknown intentions. Its hyperbolic trajectory means it's not bound to our solar system. If it contains technology, information, or capabilities beyond human understanding, then allowing unrestricted access to that object poses an unacceptable risk to national and global security. Therefore, all communication with the object must be coordinated, monitored, and controlled through a central authority. That authority, conveniently, will be them. But how do you enforce a perimeter in space? You can't build a wall. You can't station guards. Space is vast, silent, and unyielding, a domain where borders are meaningless and distance is both an ally and an enemy. What you can do is control the signals. The tactics will involve something like Atlas VB blocks, a hypothetical system for jamming or intercepting any transmissions aimed at the object. Imagine constellations of small satellites launched in clusters atop reusable rockets, forming a net of electromagnetic interference. Ground-based and space-based monitoring assets will track every radio telescope, every amateur transmission, every satellite uplink. Anything attempting to communicate with 3I Atlas without authorization gets shut down, jammed, or simply never reaches its target. An electromagnetic moat, invisible but impassable, daring anyone to cross it. NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, will find its scientists politely but firmly escorted out of decision-making rooms. Their expertise in astrophysics, planetary science, and exobiology will be sidelined in favor of military strategists and intelligence analysts. International space science bodies, the committees and working groups that coordinate global astronomy, will receive talking points instead of invitations. The International Astronomical Union, the Committee on Space Research, and even the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs will be informed, not consulted. This will no longer be a scientific question. It will be a defense question, and defense questions get answered by people with rank insignia, not PhD credentials. Other nations will react exactly how you'd expect. Formal protests will be lodged. Emergency sessions will be convened at the United Nations, with diplomats from 193 member states debating the legality, morality, and practicality of the American exclusion zone. Smaller countries, those without independent space capabilities, will demand multilateral protocols, arguing that first contact should be a collective effort, not a unilateral declaration. Larger countries, those with their own space programs, will begin quiet preparations for non-compliance. China will activate its Beidou satellite network, Russia will ready its GLONASS constellation, and the European Space Agency will convene emergency meetings in Paris and Darmstadt. The diplomatic language will be careful, measured, diplomatic. The subtext will be fury. Nobody wants to be locked out of first contact. Nobody wants to trust a single nation, especially a geopolitical rival, to speak for humanity. The moral outcry will begin when the news leaks, because it always leaks. Someone in the intelligence community, horrified by the unilateral power grab, will send an encrypted file to a journalist at the Washington Post or the New York Times. A mid-level bureaucrat at NASA, watching years of collaborative international science get shredded, will post a cryptic tweet that goes viral within hours. Whistleblowers will emerge, their faces blurred and voices distorted as they sit in shadowed rooms, telling the world what's really happening. Media speculation will explode. Pundits will debate the ethics of exclusion on cable news shows, while social media platforms light up with hashtags like "Juk First Contact for All" and "No has no monopoly on space." Public opinion will fracture along predictable lines. Some people will support the monopoly in the name of safety, arguing that a single, unified response is the only way to protect humanity from the unknown. Others will see it as imperial overreach, a naked grab for power disguised as paternalistic concern. Still others will simply panic, because the existence of the exclusion zone implies there's something worth excluding. But here's the real risk, the one that nobody wants to say out loud. Whoever controls first contact defines humanity's narrative to whatever intelligence might be listening. If the United States speaks for Earth, then Earth sounds American. American values, American priorities, American assumptions about power and hierarchy and negotiation. Maybe that's fine. Maybe it's a disaster. Maybe the alien intelligence doesn't care. Or maybe it cares very much, and the way we introduce ourselves in those first fragile moments, the words we choose, the tone we set, the intentions we convey, determines whether contact becomes cooperation or catastrophe. So the exclusion gambit is underway. Space Force has drawn its line. The rest of the world is deciding whether to respect that line or cross it. And in Beijing, in a secure facility far from prying satellites, someone is making a very different calculation. They're looking at the trajectory of 3i Atlas, the angles of approach, the windows of opportunity. They're calculating intercept vectors, launch timelines, and communication protocols. They're asking themselves a simple question: what if we get there first? Section 3. The Shadow Transmission. China is no longer a bit player in space. The country operates the 500-meter Aperture Spherical Telescope, the largest radio telescope on Earth, nestled in the karst depressions of Guizhou Province. Its dish, equivalent to 30 football fields in size, can detect radio signals from 13.7 billion light-years away, making it a formidable tool for deep space observation. Beyond this, China has deployed quantum communication satellites like Michus, a pioneering platform that has successfully demonstrated entanglement-based quantum key distribution over a record-breaking distance of 1,200 kilometers. The Tiangong space station orbits overhead, a symbol of China's growing capacity to sustain long-term human presence in space. On the Martian surface, the Zhurong rover explores Utopia Planitia, while the Yutu-2 rover traverses the lunar far side, collecting data from a region unseen by human eyes until China's Chang'e 4 mission. The capability to observe and transmit to deep space objects exists, and it exists independent of Western infrastructure. That independence matters when the West tries to monopolize first contact. While the United States makes its moves at the United Nations, filing formal notifications and legal justifications for the exclusion zone, China adopts what I'll call the silent listener strategy. No public announcements, no diplomatic grandstanding, just quiet, methodical repositioning of assets. Space-based surveillance platforms like the Yaogan satellites adjust their orbits, providing coverage of regions far beyond Earth's atmosphere. Ground stations in remote provinces, such as the Deep Space Tracking Facility in Jammusi, retask their antenna arrays to align with the trajectory of 3i Atlas. Encrypted communication channels, the kind hardened against both espionage and jamming, go active. Everything happens below the threshold of international incident, but nothing happens by accident. The technical play involves quantum key distribution, a communication method that uses the principles of quantum mechanics to create theoretically unbreakable encryption. You encode information in the quantum states of photons, transmit those photons to your target, and anyone trying to intercept or eavesdrop collapses the quantum state, alerting you to the intrusion. It's not science fiction anymore. In 2017, China successfully transmitted quantum-encrypted data between missions and ground stations in Austria and China, demonstrating the feasibility of global quantum communication networks. And if you wanted to send a message to an interstellar object without anyone else knowing the content, quantum key distribution is how you do it. Why would China choose secrecy over diplomacy? Several reasons, none of them comforting. First, bypassing Western bureaucracy means avoiding Western veto power. If contact requires consensus, then the nation with the loudest voice or the most allies controls the outcome. Secrecy circumvents that entirely. Second, establishing a direct bilateral channel with an alien intelligence, assuming one exists and responds, grants enormous strategic leverage. You become the sole intermediary. Every other nation has to come through you. You write the terms. For context, consider the 2015 establishment of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, where China positioned itself as the central node in a multinational financial network, compelling even reluctant Western nations to join on its terms. Third, and perhaps most cynically, if the gambit fails, if nothing responds, or if the transmission is intercepted, plausible deniability remains intact. Deny everything. Blame rogue scientists. Move on. But imagine the gambit succeeds. Imagine that 3i Atlas, or whatever intelligence it represents, receives the encrypted transmission and responds on the same quantum channel. Suddenly, China possesses information that nobody else has. A conversation is happening, and half the planet doesn't even know it started. The strategic implications are staggering. Technology transfer, if that's on the table, flows to one nation. Diplomatic recognition, if aliens care about such things, gets extended to one government. The balance of power on Earth shifts overnight because someone in Beijing asked a question and something out there answered. In geopolitical terms, this would be akin to the 1972 Nixon-Mao rapprochement, which realigned global alliances and reshaped the Cold War, but on an interstellar scale. The paranoia this triggers will be immediate and all-consuming. American intelligence agencies will detect unusual transmission patterns from Chinese ground stations. The content will be encrypted beyond current decryption capabilities, so they won't confirm what's being sent, but the directionality and timing will be suspicious. The National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, will task its fleet of signals intelligence satellites to monitor Chinese assets, while the National Security Agency, NSA, will activate its global network of listening posts, from Menwith Hill in the UK to Pine Gap in Australia. Russia will pick up similar anomalies through its own extensive SIGINT infrastructure, including the Lourdes facility in Cuba and the Sari Shagan anti-ballistic missile testing site in Kazakhstan. European signals intelligence will do the same, with France's DGSE and Germany's BND pooling resources to track the mysterious transmissions. Accusations will fly, denials will be issued, conspiracy theories will explode across social media platforms, each more elaborate than the last. Did China make first contact? Is there a secret agreement? Are they already receiving alien technology? The information environment will become so polluted with speculation that actual truth, if it emerges, will be nearly impossible to verify. Trust, already fragile, will collapse entirely. International forums will devolve into shouting matches. Allies will pressure China for transparency. China will refuse, citing national sovereignty and the hypocrisy of American exclusion efforts. Smaller nations, terrified of being locked out of whatever's happening, will begin choosing sides. The multilateral order, built painstakingly over decades, will start to fracture, reminiscent of the breakdown of the League of Nations in the 1930s, but with the added destabilizing factor of extraterrestrial involvement. And 3i Atlas, hurtling outbound through the solar system at a velocity of 94 kilometers per second, will remain silent. Or perhaps it's not silent. Perhaps it's just choosing who to talk to. But while China plays the secrecy game, another actor is preparing a different strategy entirely, one that doesn't aim to win first contact, but to ensure nobody else does either. Section 4. The spoiler strategy. Russia has a problem. It lacks the sheer resources of the United States and the rapid technological advancement of China. Its space program, while historically significant, operates on a fraction of the budget its rivals enjoy, roughly $2.7 billion annually, compared to NASA's $25 billion and China's $13 billion. It cannot outcompete in the conventional race for first contact, so it does what asymmetric actors have always done when facing stronger opponents. It changes the game. The spoiler strategy is elegant in its simplicity. If Russia cannot be first, then nobody will be first. If Russia cannot monopolize contact, then contact itself becomes impossible. You don't need superior technology to accomplish this. You need creativity, audacity, and a willingness to burn bridges. Russia has proven its willingness to disrupt global systems before, most famously during the 2015 hack of Ukraine's power grid, which left 225,000 people without electricity. That incident demonstrated Russia's ability to target critical infrastructure with precision, a chilling prelude to what it could do to scientific and communication networks on a global scale. Cyber attacks are the obvious starting point. Western astronomical observatories, the big installations with planet-finding capabilities, and deep space communication arrays rely on networked computer systems. Those systems are vulnerable. In 2022, the Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile, slated to map the southern sky with unprecedented detail, reported over 30,000 cyber intrusion attempts in a single year. You don't need to destroy the telescopes themselves. You just need to corrupt the data they produce. Introduce subtle errors into observational data sets. Trigger false positives in signal detection algorithms. Make scientists doubt their own instruments. If nobody can trust their measurements, nobody can confirm what 3i Atlas is doing. Communications networks are next. Global coordination of astronomical observations depends on data-sharing platforms, collaborative software, real-time feeds between institutions. In 2019, the European Southern Observatory, ESO, which operates some of the world's most advanced telescopes, suffered a cyber attack that compromised email systems and disrupted internal communications for weeks. Imagine targeted malware introduced into those systems, designed to propagate slowly, activate simultaneously, and shut down coordination at the critical moment. Or imagine distributed denial-of-service attacks overwhelming key servers exactly when they're needed most. The goal isn't permanent damage. The goal is temporary blindness at the moment that matters. But the most dangerous tactic is informational, the false flag alien broadcast. Picture this scenario. A signal appears, seemingly from 3i Atlas, transmitted on frequencies consistent with intelligent communication. The signal contains patterns, mathematical sequences, maybe even image data. It spreads across amateur radio networks, gets picked up by independent researchers, goes viral before anyone can authenticate it. Governments scramble to analyze it. Media runs with the story. Public reaction explodes. Then the forensics come back. The signal didn't originate from 3i Atlas. It came from a cluster of compromised ground stations, carefully coordinated, to mimic a deep space source. The entire thing was fabricated, a hoax, a false flag, and by the time the truth emerges, trust is already shattered. Nobody knows what to believe anymore. Legitimate signals, if they arrive later, get dismissed as more propaganda. The information environment becomes so toxic that meaningful communication collapses. Russia's strategic goal is paralysis. If no single power can reliably communicate with the object, then no single power gains an advantage. The playing field perversely becomes level again, and paralysis serves Russian interests in other ways. Energy markets, for instance. If the world believes alien technology is imminent, oil and gas prices collapse. Russia's economy, heavily dependent on energy exports, suffers catastrophically. Energy exports account for 60% of Russia's total exports and 30% of its federal budget revenue. But if doubt and chaos prevent any clear contact, then the status quo persists. Markets stabilize. Russian revenue continues. Survival through sabotage. Psychological warfare amplifies the effect. Russian state media and allied propaganda outlets begin running stories questioning the motives of other nations. American imperialism, Chinese secrecy, European weakness. Each narrative is tailored to its target audience, designed to sow division, fear, and mistrust. Social media amplification ensures the messages reach millions. In 2016, Russia's Internet Research Agency reached over 126 million Americans on Facebook alone with divisive content. Some stories suggest 3i Atlas is dangerous, a threat rather than an opportunity. Others hint that contact has already occurred and is being hidden. The goal is cognitive overload. Too much information, too many contradictions, no stable ground for consensus. Historical analogies exist: Cold War espionage, proxy conflicts, information operations during elections. The tactics are proven. What's new is the scale and the stakes. This isn't about territory or ideology. This is about humanity's introduction to the cosmos. And if that introduction fails because we sabotaged ourselves, well, that would be very human, wouldn't it? The risk of escalation is real. If American or Chinese intelligence conclusively traces cyber attacks back to Russian sources, retaliation becomes likely. Maybe not kinetic strikes, not yet, but counter-cyber operations, economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation. The spiral begins. And while the major powers are focused on each other, 3i Atlas continues its outbound journey, indifferent to the chaos it has triggered simply by existing. But there's another dimension to this crisis, one that transcends military posturing and intelligence games. While governments scramble for strategic advantage, financial markets are already reacting to the mere possibility of what 3i Atlas might represent. In the weeks following the object's discovery, global stock markets saw a $3 trillion sell-off as investors hedged against the unknown. Tech stocks surged on speculation that companies like SpaceX or Blue Origin might be positioned to capitalize on alien technology, while traditional energy and defense sectors plummeted. The volatility was unprecedented, with trading algorithms amplifying the swings. And this was just the beginning. Observation, interpretation, speculation. The spoiler strategy doesn't just target governments and scientific institutions, it targets the public's ability to process reality. In an age where misinformation spreads faster than truth, the introduction of an alien object becomes the perfect catalyst for global paranoia. People don't need evidence to believe. They need a narrative that fits their fears. Russia understands this better than anyone. By injecting doubt into every stage of the process, from observation to communication to interpretation, it ensures that even if contact is made, the world will be too fragmented to act as one. The spoiler strategy, in its ultimate form, isn't just about preventing first contact. It's about preventing unity. If humanity cannot come together in the face of the unknown, then the unknown will remain unknown. And in that uncertainty, Russia and other powers like it can continue to operate in the shadows, unchallenged by the light of a unified world. Section 5. The energy panic spiral. Financial markets run on expectations, not reality. Expectations. The moment credible rumors spread that 3i Atlas might contain, transmit, or represent access to advanced alien technology, especially energy technology, those expectations shift. And when expectations shift in the energy sector, the entire global economy convulses. The energy sector accounts for roughly 10% of global GDP, with oil and gas alone representing 3.8% of the world's economy. Any disruption to this sector sends shockwaves through every interconnected industry, from manufacturing to agriculture, transportation to finance. Let me paint the picture. It's December 21st, 48 hours after closest approach. Unconfirmed reports leaked from intelligence sources suggest that spectroscopic analysis of the object shows anomalies inconsistent with natural cometary composition. One report mentions potential energy signatures. Another uses the phrase unexplained thermal emissions. The language is cautious, hedged, speculative. But financial analysts are paid to read between the lines and act before certainty arrives. Algorithms designed to scrape news headlines and social media trends amplify the panic, triggering automated trades that cascade through global exchanges at the speed of light. Oil futures open sharply lower. Natural gas follows. Energy sector stocks begin to slide. The reasoning is simple. If alien technology exists, and if that technology includes advanced energy generation, zero-point energy, fusion, antimatter, anything beyond our current combustion-based systems, then the entire fossil fuel industry becomes obsolete overnight. Not in 50 years. Not in 20. overnight. The global oil market, valued at $2.4 trillion in 2023, faces an existential crisis. Entire nations, economies, and corporations built on the extraction, refinement, and distribution of fossil fuels suddenly confront their own irrelevance. The psychological shock alone is enough to paralyze markets. Energy exporting nations watch their sovereign wealth funds hemorrhage value. Russia's budget, two-thirds dependent on oil and gas revenue, faces a liquidity crisis within days. The ruble, already volatile, loses 30% of its value against major currencies in a single trading session. Middle Eastern monarchies, their stability built on petrodollar flows, see their currencies wobble. Saudi Arabia, which relies on oil for 87% of its budget revenue, finds itself on the brink of economic collapse as its $620 billion sovereign wealth fund evaporates. Venezuela, already teetering, tips into complete state failure. Caracas erupts in violence as food and fuel shortages intensify, with the military fragmenting into rival factions. The dominoes fall faster than central banks can respond. Commodity markets spike and dive in chaotic patterns. Lithium and rare earth elements, critical for current renewable technology, surge as investors bet on transitional demand. Then they crash as someone points out that alien tech might bypass renewables entirely. Gold, the traditional safe haven, sees wild swings as investors flee risk, but can't agree on where safety lies. Currencies tied to commodity exports plunge. The Canadian dollar, heavily influenced by oil prices, drops to its lowest level since the 1990s. The Norwegian krone, bolstered by the country's $1.3 trillion sovereign wealth fund, becomes a flashpoint for speculative attacks. Because if energy becomes free or nearly free, then every price structure in the global economy changes. Transportation costs evaporate. Manufacturing costs restructure. Entire industries based on energy scarcity, energy distribution, energy efficiency, all of it becomes irrelevant. The global shipping industry, which consumes 300 million metric tons of fuel annually, sees its business model upended. Airlines, which spend 30% of their operating costs on fuel, face immediate bankruptcy. The uncertainty alone is enough to trigger mass sell-offs. Bond markets for energy export states collapse. Who lends money to a government whose primary revenue source just became worthless? Yields spike as investors demand massive premiums for risk. Some nations find themselves unable to refinance existing debt. Default looms. International financial institutions, the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, prepare emergency stabilization packages. But the scale of the crisis outstrips their resources. The IMF's $1 trillion lending capacity is exhausted within weeks. Political fallout is immediate. Governments face impossible choices. Do you deny the rumors and risk looking unprepared when confirmation arrives? Do you confirm possibilities and accelerate the panic? Do you impose capital controls, restrict trading, freeze markets? Every option carries enormous costs. Social unrest begins in energy-dependent economies as unemployment spikes and government services collapse. Protests turn into riots. Regimes that looked stable last week face existential threats this week. In Nigeria, where 90% of export earnings come from oil, the government declares a state of emergency as protests against fuel scarcity turn violent. In Iraq, where oil accounts for 99% of export revenue, ISIS remnants exploit the chaos to reclaim territory. The Global South, nations that import energy rather than export it, initially appear poised to benefit. Cheaper energy means economic stimulus, right? But the financial contagion spreads faster than benefits arrive. Credit markets freeze, international trade contracts. The same nations that hoped for relief find themselves cut off from global finance, unable to secure the loans or investment needed to capitalize on changing conditions. Bangladesh, which imports 90% of its energy, sees its currency devalued by 50% as it struggles to pay for critical fuel supplies. Pakistan, already on the brink of default, sees its last lifelines severed as lenders pull out. Philosophical questions emerge amidst the chaos. Is the gift of unlimited energy actually a gift if it destroys the political and economic structures that have maintained global order for a century? If alien technology upends the geopolitical map, who fills the power vacuum? Which nations rise? Which fall? And what happens in the violent transition between the old world and the new? In India, where 700 million people still lack reliable access to electricity, the promise of alien technology sparks hope, but also fear. Protests erupt as citizens demand the government secure access to the technology, while politicians scramble to manage expectations and prevent social unrest. And here's the truly disturbing part. All of this happens before anyone confirms whether 3i Atlas actually contains technology at all. The panic spiral feeds on possibility, rumor, fear of being left behind. Markets are crashing because of what might be true, not what is true. We are destroying ourselves over a hypothesis. By the time credible information emerges, if it ever does, the damage is done. Global wealth has been redistributed. Power structures have shifted. Entire nations have collapsed or risen. In Brazil, where the stock market loses 40% of its value in a single week, the government imposes martial law to prevent mass looting. In South Africa, where energy shortages have already crippled the economy, the ruling party faces a coup as rival factions vie for control. And the question nobody wants to ask becomes unavoidable. If this is what we do to ourselves when an alien simply passes by, what happens if they actually want to talk? But governments and markets aren't the only actors in this scenario. In the chaos, in the cracks, between official authority and public panic, other forces are moving. Forces that don't appear in diplomatic cables or financial reports. Forces that might be the most dangerous of all. In the shadows, extremist groups, rogue states, and opportunistic corporations see the turmoil as a chance to reshape the world in their own image. They begin to act, quietly at first, but with growing boldness. The stage is set for a new kind of conflict, one that could redefine humanity's future in ways no one can predict. Section 6. Rogue Signals. Earth has no unified protocol enforcement mechanism for deep space transmission. Let that sink in. We have traffic laws, we have air traffic control, we have maritime regulations. But when it comes to shouting into the cosmos, it's essentially a free-for-all. Anyone with a transmitter powerful enough can send whatever message they want into the void. And if 3i Atlas represents first contact, that void is about to shout back. Imagine the scale of the problem. There are approximately 3 million licensed amateur radio operators globally, each with the technical capability to transmit. These aren't fringe hobbyists. They include engineers, scientists, and even former employees of space agencies. They've spent years perfecting their equipment, often building custom antennas and amplifiers that can broadcast signals tens of thousands of kilometers into space. For many of them, contacting extraterrestrial life has been a lifelong dream, and the arrival of 3i Atlas will feel like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Dozens of clubs and organizations, like AMSAT or the Radio Society of Great Britain, could mobilize their members overnight, turning garages and backyards into makeshift ground stations. The problem is coordination, or rather, the complete lack of it. Major space agencies, NASA, the European Space Agency, the China National Space Administration, have protocols. They have committees. They have decades of careful thought about what humanity should say if we ever get the chance. The SETI Institute, for example, has spent over 30 years developing guidelines for post-detection communication, including the establishment of the SETI Permanent Committee in 1989. But those protocols are voluntary. They carry no force of law, and they certainly don't bind the thousands of other actors who might decide to participate. Amateur radio operators exist worldwide, tens of thousands of them. They have the equipment, the knowledge, and the legal right to transmit. Some of them have been listening for alien signals for decades through programs like SETI Home, which at its peak had over 5 million participants volunteering their computers to process data from the Arecibo Observatory. Now, imagine their reaction when an actual interstellar object appears. Do you think they'll wait for government permission? Do you think they'll coordinate with international bodies? Or do you think they'll craft their own messages, transmit on their own schedules, and hope to be the one who makes history? Private research laboratories, especially those funded by wealthy individuals with strong opinions about first contact, represent another wild card. Some of these labs have transmission capabilities rivaling national observatories. Breakthrough. Listen, funded by Yuri Milner, uses some of the world's most powerful telescopes, like the Green Bank Telescope and the Parkes Observatory, to scan the skies for technosignatures. Their funding doesn't depend on government grants or international cooperation. They answer to donors, board members, ideological commitments. If they decide to transmit, they transmit. Take the Allen Telescope Array, for example. Built by the SETI Institute with funding from Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft, it's designed specifically for extraterrestrial communication. If a private lab like this decides to take matters into its own hands, there's little to stop them. And with billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos pouring resources into space exploration, the potential for unilateral action only grows. Musk alone has launched over 4,000 Starlink satellites into orbit, demonstrating the scale of private space infrastructure. Religious organizations add another layer. Various faiths have specific theological frameworks for interpreting alien life. Some see it as confirmation of universal creation. The Vatican Observatory, for instance, has publicly stated that the discovery of extraterrestrial life would not contradict Catholic teaching. Others view it as a spiritual threat. Evangelical groups might see aliens as a challenge to the idea of humanity's central role in God's plan. Still, others believe first contact represents prophetic fulfillment. Imagine a well-funded ministry decides that converting alien intelligences to their faith is a divine mandate. They commandeer a radio telescope, draft a message heavy with religious symbolism, and broadcast before anyone can stop them. Is that illegal? Maybe. Does that stop them? History suggests not. The Mormon Church, for example, has a long-standing interest in astronomy and operates its own observatory in Utah. If they decide to send a message rooted in their beliefs about the universe, they have the means to do so. Similarly, the Scientology-funded superpower building in Clearwater, Florida, houses advanced communication equipment that could theoretically be repurposed for deep space transmission. Then you have the conspiracy theorists, the UFO communities, the true believers who have been waiting their entire lives for validation. They have websites, they have followings, some have resources, and they absolutely will attempt contact. Their messages might be coherent or completely unhinged, scientifically rigorous or riddled with pseudoscience. Doesn't matter. They're transmitting. The Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, with over 4,000 members worldwide, has been investigating UFO sightings since 1969. If 3i Atlas triggers a surge in reported sightings, their members might feel emboldened to take direct action. Groups like the Raelian movement, which believes extraterrestrials created humanity, could see this as their moment to prove their theories. They've already attempted to establish embassies for alien visitors. Transmitting a message would be a natural next step. What you end up with is a distributed denial-of-service attack on an alien listener. Imagine hundreds, maybe thousands of simultaneous transmissions from different locations, different frequencies, different modulation schemes, all aimed at the same object. Mathematical primers, prime number sequences, binary representations of DNA, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, memes, literally memes, because someone will definitely transmit memes. The Bible, the Quran, the complete works of Shakespeare, Rick Astley. I'm not joking. Someone will absolutely try to rickroll an alien civilization. Some transmissions might even be harmful. High-powered microwave beams, for instance, could theoretically disrupt or damage sensitive alien technology. The US military has already experimented with directed energy weapons that use microwaves to disable electronics. If a rogue actor decides to test this on 3i Atlas, the consequences could be disastrous. From the perspective of 3i Atlas, if anything is listening, this would appear as pure chaos. Not a unified voice of humanity reaching out in peaceful greeting, but a cacophony of competing, contradictory, sometimes hostile signals. How does an intelligence interpret that? Maybe as a sign of vibrant diversity. Or maybe as a planet-wide mental breakdown. We have no idea. Historical parallels exist. In the early days of radio, before regulation, interference was constant. Stations would override each other. Messages would collide in the airwaves. Commerce and communication struggled until international treaties established order. The first attempt at regulation came in 1906 with the International Radio Telegraph Convention, but it took decades for effective standards to emerge. We don't have decades. We have days, maybe hours after closest approach before the transmission flood begins. The immediate consequences could range from benign to catastrophic. Benign scenario. The alien intelligence, if it exists, ignores the noise and waits for a coherent signal. Catastrophic scenario. It interprets the flood as aggression, as informational warfare, as a sign that this planet is too chaotic to engage safely. Maybe it responds with silence. Maybe it responds with something worse. Existing protocols like the SETI Post-Detection Protocol recommend international consultation before any transmission to a confirmed alien intelligence. But these are recommendations, not laws. They assume good faith. They assume cooperation. They assume that humans, when faced with the most important moment in our species' history, will act rationally and collectively. How's that assumption looking so far? Regional wildcards make it worse. Small nations with radio astronomy capabilities may be seeking global relevance, or simply driven by scientific curiosity, might attempt their own transmissions. A university observatory in Chile, a research station in South Africa, a private facility in Australia. Each message adds to the noise. Each transmission carries the risk of unintended consequences. Consider the Square Kilometre Array, SKA, a global project involving 14 countries, including South Africa and Australia. While its primary goal is to explore the universe, it has the technical capability to transmit powerful signals. If a rogue scientist within the SKA organization decides to act unilaterally, the fallout could be immense. The moral question underlying all of this is deceptively simple. Is letting everyone try better than letting no one try? Democratic chaos versus authoritarian silence. Both options carry risks. Both might lead to disaster. And we're about to find out which one humanity chooses by default. Because choosing requires coordination we don't possess. But while Earth floods the cosmos with random signals, another problem is emerging. The private companies that built our space infrastructure, the corporations that own the satellites and ground stations and launch platforms, are about to find their assets caught in a geopolitical vice. And their response might be the most unpredictable factor of all. SpaceX, for example, operates the largest commercial satellite constellation in history with its Starlink network. If a government or rogue actor tries to commandeer one of their satellites to transmit a message to 3i Atlas, the company could face pressure to comply or resist. Amazon's Project Kuiper, another satellite internet initiative, will soon launch thousands of its own satellites, further complicating the situation. These corporations have the technology, the infrastructure, and the financial resources to influence how humanity communicates with an alien intelligence, for better or worse. Section 7. The corporate wildcards. The privatization of space infrastructure happened gradually, then suddenly. For decades, space was the domain of governments. Only nations had the resources, the expertise, the political will to reach orbit. NASA's budget in the 1960s peaked at 4.41% of the total US federal budget, a figure unimaginable today. Then the cost curves shifted. Reusable rockets, like SpaceX's Falcon 9, reduced launch costs from approximately $25,000 per kilogram in the 1980s to less than $2,000 per kilogram today. Private investment poured in, with SpaceX raising over $6 billion in funding since its inception, and Blue Origin backed by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, who sells $1 billion in Amazon stock annually to fund the venture. Companies like these built capabilities that matched or exceeded traditional space agencies. Today, a significant fraction of Earth's space, communication, and observation infrastructure is privately owned. Starlink, operated by SpaceX, consists of over 4,000 satellites, providing global internet access and comprising the largest satellite constellation in history. That shift matters enormously when 3i Atlas becomes a strategic asset, because those private ground stations, those commercial satellites, those corporate launch platforms, they're not just business assets anymore. They're choke points. Whoever controls them controls Earth's ability to listen, observe, and potentially communicate with an interstellar object, and governments, when faced with existential stakes, have a long history of seizing control of critical infrastructure. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the US government placed all telecommunications under military control to ensure uninterrupted access. The timeline will move fast. Within hours or days of confirmed anomalous activity from 3I Atlas, governments will begin invoking emergency powers. In the United States, the Defense Production Act, used over 300 times since its inception in 1950, allows federal seizure of private assets deemed critical to national security. Ground stations will receive notices. Satellite uplinks will be commandeered. Corporate executives will find themselves suddenly answering to military officers. Legal precedent exists. During World War II, the US government nationalized railroads, telecommunications, and even coal mines to support the war effort. The justification is always the same. The national interest supersedes private property rights during existential crisis. Where first contact qualifies as an existential crisis is debatable. Whether governments will treat it as one is not. Space companies will find themselves in an impossible position. Their assets represent billions in investment. SpaceX's valuation reached $127 billion in 2022, while Blue Origin's investments exceed $10 billion annually. Their customers, both commercial and governmental, depend on reliable access. Their shareholders expect returns, with SpaceX estimating potential revenues from Starlink alone at $30 billion by 2025. But now, military commanders are dictating operational priorities. Launch schedules get rewritten, as seen in 2020, when the US Space Force postponed a SpaceX Falcon 9 launch due to national security concerns. Communication bandwidth gets allocated to government signals. Encryption protocols get backdoored for intelligence access, mirroring the controversies surrounding backdoors in consumer encryption standards during the 1990s crypto wars. The companies can comply and survive or resist and face legal destruction. Some will comply immediately, as seen in 2022, when SpaceX allowed the US military to use Starlink satellites for communication in Ukraine. Others will resist. The resistance might be principled, defending private property and corporate autonomy, reminiscent of Apple's refusal to unlock the iPhone of the San Bernardino shooter in 2016. Or it might be strategic, betting that international outcry or legal challenges will force governments to back down, similar to the global outcry that led to the suspension of US surveillance programs revealed by Edward Snowden in 2013. Either way, the conflict creates chaos exactly when coordination is needed most. The new arms race isn't about rockets anymore. It's about ground station density, global footprint, encryption capabilities. China's Beidou satellite navigation system, operational since 2020, is a direct competitor to the US GPS, offering an alternative global navigation infrastructure. Whichever nation controls the most diverse network of listening posts and transmission facilities has the best chance of maintaining contact if 3I Atlas begins communicating. Countries without indigenous space infrastructure will scramble to secure access through diplomatic or commercial means. Bilateral deals will be struck, as seen in 2021, when Australia signed an agreement with NASA to secure access to the Artemis lunar program. Old alliances will be tested. But here's the nightmare scenario keeping executives awake. A rogue billionaire with enough resources and ideological commitment decides to attempt unauthorized contact. Elon Musk, with a net worth exceeding $200 billion, has already demonstrated his willingness to challenge regulatory frameworks, as seen in his public disputes with the US Securities and Exchange Commission. Maybe they believe governments are too slow, too compromised, too stupid to handle first contact properly. Maybe they have a messianic complex, mirroring historical figures like Howard Hughes, who poured his fortune into increasingly eccentric projects. Maybe they genuinely think they can do better. They use their private satellites, their private ground stations, their private funding to transmit a message crafted according to their personal vision of what humanity should say. Government response will be immediate and harsh. In 2019, the US government fined Facebook $5 billion for privacy violations, signaling its willingness to impose significant penalties on corporations. Federal agents will seize facilities. Assets will be frozen. Arrests will be made. Criminal charges will range from violations of communication law to potentially treason, depending on how aggressively prosecutors want to frame unauthorized contact with an alien intelligence. The legal battles will stretch for years, as seen in the ongoing litigation surrounding Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. The political fallout will dominate news cycles, and the precedent will be set. Private actors cannot be trusted with species-level decisions. Public relations will become a battlefield. Corporate spokespeople will claim they're defending freedom and innovation, echoing the rhetoric of tech giants like Google and Apple in their battles against regulatory oversight. Government officials will insist they're protecting humanity, drawing parallels to national security measures implemented after 9/11. Opinion will split predictably along existing political divides. Those who distrust government will see tyranny, reminiscent of the backlash against the Patriot Act. Those who distrust corporations will see reckless endangerment, similar to the public outcry against big tech's data privacy scandals. Neither side will be entirely wrong. Global inequality will sharpen the conflict. Wealthy nations with robust private space sectors can nationalize assets and maintain capability. The US, China, and Russia collectively spent over $80 billion on space programs in 2022, dwarfing the combined expenditures of all other nations. Poorer nations without indigenous infrastructure will get locked out entirely. They will depend on the goodwill of others for access to information about an event that affects all humanity equally. The post-colonial dynamics will be ugly and obvious. Resentment will build, as seen in the ongoing debates about vaccine inequity during the COVID-19 pandemic. Historical grievances will resurface. The unity narrative will collapse under the weight of material reality. Meanwhile, commercial space companies that manage to avoid nationalization will face different pressures. Their satellites, their ground stations, suddenly become targets for espionage, sabotage, or hostile acquisition by foreign powers. In 2018, Bloomberg reported that Chinese spies had infiltrated the supply chains of major US tech companies, including Apple and Amazon, by planting microchips on servers. Corporate security, designed to protect against industrial espionage, will prove inadequate against state-level threats. Insurance companies will refuse to cover losses from acts of war or alien contact, a policy exclusion nobody thought would ever matter until it did. The technological advantage will shift rapidly to whoever can integrate corporate and governmental capabilities most effectively. The US Space Force, established in 2019, aims to collaborate with private companies to leverage their technological innovations for national security. A nation that successfully partners with its private sector, rather than simply seizing it, will gain flexibility and resilience. But that partnership requires trust, and trust is in very short supply. In 2013, revelations by Edward Snowden about mass surveillance programs eroded public trust in both government and tech companies. And in all this chaos, while major powers and wealthy corporations battle for control, a different scenario is quietly becoming possible. One that nobody predicted. One that might be the most disruptive of all. Section 8. Breakaway States and the Geopolitics of Being Ignored. Here's a scenario that keeps strategic planners awake. What if 3i Atlas doesn't pay attention to the superpowers? What if the alien intelligence, assuming one exists, has no reason to respect human hierarchies? No understanding of our political structures, no interest in dealing with whoever shouts loudest or has the biggest military. What if it picks someone else? Think about how an alien intelligence might evaluate Earth. It has no cultural context for American hegemony, Chinese economic power, or Russian military tradition. It might analyze signal sources geographically. It might prioritize locations with less electromagnetic interference. It might select based on criteria we can't imagine. And by pure chance or deliberate choice, it might direct its attention to a nation nobody expected. Radio quiet zones exist in remote regions specifically because they're far from major population centers and industrial electromagnetic noise. The Square Kilometre Array is being built partially in South Africa, a $760 million project sprawling across the Karoo Desert, one of the most radio-silent places on Earth. Chile hosts some of the world's most advanced optical and radio telescopes, including the Atacama Large Millimeter Array, ALMA, perched 5,000 meters above sea level in one of the driest regions on the planet. Australia has deep space communication facilities like the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex, a linchpin in NASA's Deep Space Network, tucked away in the quiet rural outskirts of the capital. These locations were chosen for scientific reasons: clear skies, low interference, stable geology. Those same reasons might make them attractive to an intelligence trying to establish contact with a noisy planet. Imagine 3i Atlas transmits a signal, and that signal gets detected first and most clearly not by the United States, China, or Russia, but by a research facility in Botswana, or a small observatory in Madagascar, or a university in Uruguay. Nations with limited geopolitical clout, no permanent seats on the Security Council, economies measured in billions rather than trillions. Suddenly, they're the pivot point of human history. The global scramble for influence will be immediate and overwhelming. Diplomatic delegations will arrive within hours, carrying stacks of treaties and promises. Offers of assistance will pour in. Economic aid packages will materialize overnight, dwarfing the contact state's annual GDP. Military advisors will appear, ostensibly to help maintain security around the contact site, but their presence will feel more like occupation than protection. Intelligence operatives will infiltrate under various covers: journalists, scientists, aid workers, creating a shadow network of surveillance and manipulation. Every major power will want access, will want influence, will want to ensure that whatever conversation is happening includes their interests. The chosen state will face impossible pressure. Its government, probably unprepared for this level of international attention, will have to navigate demands from powers far larger and more dangerous than itself. Imagine a small nation like Uruguay, with a population of just 3.5 million and a military budget of less than $1 billion, suddenly fielding calls from the Pentagon, the Kremlin, and Beijing. Accept too much help and risk becoming a puppet state, as happened to countless nations during the Cold War. Refuse assistance and risk being isolated or overthrown, as seen in the countless coups and regime changes orchestrated by foreign powers over the last century. Every decision will carry existential weight. Internal destabilization will become likely. Foreign intelligence services will have enormous incentive to ensure friendly leadership in the contact state. If the current government is uncooperative, well, coups have happened for far less important reasons. Public reaction worldwide will combine shock, envy, and resentment. Citizens of superpowers will struggle to understand why their technologically advanced, militarily powerful nations got passed over in favor of some small country they couldn't locate on a map last week. Conspiracy theories will explode. Some will claim the whole thing is fabricated, a ploy by the contact state to elevate its status. Others will insist it's a deliberate insult to the established order, a cosmic snub to the superpowers. Still others will see it as cosmic justice, the universe correcting human hierarchies by giving voice to the overlooked. Neo-colonial dynamics will surface immediately. Wealthy nations offering aid and expertise to the contact state will absolutely not be doing so altruistically. They'll be securing access, establishing dependencies, positioning themselves as indispensable partners. The language will be diplomatic and respectful. "We're here to help," they'll say, while their corporations and military contractors move in, staking claims to resources and strategic positions. The underlying power dynamics will be extraction and control. Smaller nations watching this process will understand exactly what's happening, and their faith in international cooperation will die a little more. They'll remember how Haiti, the first black republic, was forced to pay reparations to France for its independence, a debt that crippled its economy for centuries. They'll remember how Congo's vast mineral wealth was plundered by European powers, leaving behind a legacy of violence and instability. They'll see the contact state becoming another pawn in the great game of geopolitics. The contact state itself might split internally. Some factions will see first contact as an opportunity for unprecedented development and global relevance. Others will see it as a curse that will destroy their sovereignty and culture. Political coalitions will fracture. Regional divisions will intensify. What was a unified nation last month will become a collection of competing interests this month, all fighting over how to respond to alien attention they never asked for. In Madagascar, for example, the central government might welcome the influx of international aid, while regional leaders in Antananarivo or Toamasina might resist, fearing the loss of autonomy. In Uruguay, urban elites might see first contact as a chance to modernize, while rural communities might view it as a threat to their way of life. Moral questions will become unavoidable. Does any nation have the right to speak for humanity? Should first contact go to the powerful who have resources and stability, or to the overlooked who might bring fresh perspectives? Who deserves to be Earth's representative? The question assumes there's a good answer. There isn't. Every choice carries enormous costs and benefits distributed unequally. If the contact state is a democracy, how does it balance the will of its people with the demands of the world? If it's an autocracy, how does it resist the temptation to use first contact as a tool to consolidate power? But even as we argue about who speaks for humanity, a deeper uncertainty remains unresolved. Because despite all the speculation, all the strategic planning, all the geopolitical maneuvering, we still don't actually know what 3I Atlas is, and recent scientific evidence suggests the answer might be stranger than anyone wants to admit. Section 9. The Physics Wildcards. If 3I Atlas isn't a comet at all, let's return to the science. Because the science is getting weird, 3I Atlas has a carbon dioxide-dominated coma with a CO2 to water ratio of approximately 8.1. That's confirmed. Spectroscopic observations detected water ice, carbon monoxide, carbonyl sulfide, and silicate dust. Also confirmed. The coma shows a reddish spectral slope consistent with galactic cosmic ray processing. Confirmed. Multiple jets emerged post-perihelion, some directed anti-solar, meaning opposite the direction you'd expect from simple solar heating. Confirmed. The jets, in some cases, exhibited velocities exceeding 500 meters per second, a figure that challenges conventional models of outgassing driven solely by solar radiation. Now let's talk about what that means. Galactic cosmic ray processing happens when an object spends millions or billions of years in interstellar space, bombarded constantly by high-energy particles. This creates chemical changes in the surface layers, producing irradiated crusts that don't necessarily reflect the interior composition. So when we just analyze 3I Atlas, we're looking at damage, not origin. We're studying the scar tissue, not the body beneath. The surface of 3I Atlas may have accumulated a layer of irradiated material up to several meters thick, obscuring whatever lies below. This irradiated layer could contain complex organic molecules, products of eons of cosmic ray bombardment, which further complicate spectral analysis. The implications are unsettling. If the outer layers have been heavily modified by radiation, then our assumptions about what's inside could be completely wrong. Maybe the core is pristine interstellar ice, unchanged since the object formed in some distant stellar system billions of years ago. Or maybe it's something else. Something that doesn't sublimate like ice. Something that doesn't behave like rock. Something designed. Consider this. The density of 3I Atlas has been estimated at roughly 0.6 grams per cubic centimeter, significantly lower than typical comet densities, which hover around 0.8 This discrepancy could suggest a porous structure, or it could hint at an internal composition, unlike anything we've encountered before. Skeptics of natural origin point to the polarization data. 3I Atlas shows an unusually deep negative polarization branch, a characteristic that doesn't match typical comets or asteroids. The specific polarization curve suggests particle properties, size distributions, or material compositions outside the normal range. Not impossible naturally, but unusual enough to raise questions. Some researchers have proposed that the polarization data could indicate the presence of microscopic metallic particles embedded in the coma, a feature not typically observed in natural comets. These particles, if present, could absorb and scatter light in ways that produce the observed polarization signature. The jet structures add to the mystery. Post-perihelion observations showed multiple distinct jets emerging from the nucleus, some aligned with solar heating, others not. Complex coma morphology developed. The tail showed structure and variability beyond simple dust release. All of this can be explained by irregular nucleus shape, localized volatile pockets, differential solar heating. Comets are messy, complex objects. Weird behavior is normal. But there's a mathematical tension some observers have noted. The mass loss rates implied by the observed jet activity and tail brightness, when calculated against the estimated nucleus size, create what I'll call a physics puzzle. If the nucleus is on the smaller end of estimates, around 440 meters, then the amount of material being ejected per month appears to exceed what that volume could plausibly contain, at least under standard comet models. If the nucleus is larger, around 5 kilometers, the numbers work better. But then other observations like brightness and thermal emissions become harder to explain. One unverified calculation circulating in amateur astronomy communities and online forums suggested the jets observed earlier in the object's approach required approximately 5 billion tons per month mass flux. For a body with an estimated mass on the smaller end of the range, that rate would deplete the entire object in an implausibly short time. To make matters more confusing, the jets have exhibited periodic pulsations, with intervals as short as 12 hours, a behavior that defies easy explanation under natural comet models. Now this calculation could be wrong. The assumptions might be flawed. The nucleus might be larger than minimum estimates, or the jets might be more efficient than models predict. But the tension exists. What if 3I Atlas is not a natural comet? What if it's a probe, a scanning device, a data collection platform sent by a civilization we cannot imagine? The physics wouldn't need to balance under natural comet assumptions, because those assumptions would be wrong from the start. Observations of 3I Atlas have revealed fluctuations in its rotation rate, with changes as large as 0.1 degrees per hour over short timescales. Such variations could be explained by the activation of internal mechanisms, perhaps a propulsion system or an attitude control system, designed to stabilize or reorient the object. An artificial object designed for interstellar travel might use propulsion we don't understand. It might vent material deliberately for course corrections. It might be partially hollow, reducing mass below what we'd estimate from size alone. This is speculation. I want to be clear about that. The evidence does not conclusively support artificial origin. Natural explanations exist for every anomaly, but the possibility remains, and that possibility changes the stakes entirely. If 3I Atlas is engineered, its trajectory raises even more questions. Its path through the solar system is hyperbolic, with an eccentricity greater than 1, indicating an interstellar origin. However, its trajectory appears to have been altered slightly during its passage through the Oort cloud, suggesting a deliberate maneuver rather than a purely gravitational interaction. If 3I Atlas is engineered, then someone built it. Someone launched it. Someone programmed it to do whatever it's doing. And we have no idea what that someone wants or expects. Intelligence communities and scientific bodies would approach this possibility very differently. Scientists would want more data, more observations, careful analysis before drawing conclusions. Intelligence agencies would prepare for worst-case scenarios immediately. The gap between those approaches creates friction and mistrust. Consider the 1998 Mars Climate Orbiter disaster, where a simple unit conversion error led to the loss of a $327 million spacecraft. If miscommunication on such a small scale can result in catastrophe, imagine the consequences when the stakes are interstellar. Military strategists, if they believed 3I Atlas might be artificial, would treat it as a potential threat, not because it has demonstrated hostility, but because unknown capabilities demand defensive postures. You don't wait to confirm a weapon is armed before you take precautions. You prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But there's another layer to this. If alien engineering is real, if technology far beyond ours actually exists and is currently moving through our solar system, then the geopolitical scramble isn't just about communication. It's about acquisition. It's about reverse engineering. It's about whoever gets their hands on that technology first achieving a permanent, insurmountable advantage over everyone else. The Apollo program cost the United States $25.4 billion in 1960s dollars, equivalent to over $200 billion today. Imagine the resources a nation would pour into reverse engineering an alien artifact, dwarfing even the most ambitious space programs of the past. The prize isn't just first contact, it's potentially the future of human civilization. And that brings us to the darkest possibility of all. Because if the stakes are that high, and if trust is already shattered, then the temptation to lie, to fabricate, to create false evidence or false contact for strategic advantage becomes almost irresistible. In 1983, the Soviet Union's early warning system detected an incoming nuclear attack from the United States. Only the quick thinking of Stanislav Petrov, who correctly identified the alert as a false alarm, prevented a retaliatory strike that could have sparked a global nuclear war. In a world where the truth about 3I Atlas could reshape geopolitics overnight, the pressure to act or to deceive would be unimaginable. The consequences of mishandling this situation are almost too vast to comprehend. A single miscalculation, a single piece of misinformation could plunge the world into chaos. The stakes are not just scientific or technological, they are existential. If 3I Atlas is artificial, it represents a turning point in human history, a moment when we either rise to the challenge of cosmic understanding or succumb to the worst impulses of our nature. The choice is ours, but the clock is ticking. Section 10, the conspiracy layer. We need to talk about the possibility of fabrication, because once multiple powers have motive, means, and opportunity, the likelihood that someone attempts to fake alien contact approaches certainty, and a well-executed fake could be more dangerous than real contact. It could destabilize global alliances, trigger economic chaos, and even ignite conflicts that reverberate for generations. The stakes are almost incalculably high, not just for nations, but for the future of human civilization. The scenario is straightforward. A major power, let's say one losing the conventional race for first contact, decides to manufacture evidence of alien communication. The signal would need to appear authentic, correct frequency range, appropriate modulation, originating from the apparent direction of 3I Atlas. Modern signal processing and distributed antenna arrays make this technically feasible, especially if you control enough ground stations to create the illusion of a deep space source. For example, China's FAST telescope, the largest single-dish radio telescope in the world, could play a pivotal role in such a deception. Its 500-meter aperture and advanced signal processing capabilities make it a prime candidate for both detecting and potentially fabricating interstellar signals. Similarly, the US's Very Large Array, VLA, in New Mexico, with its 27 independent antennas, could be employed to triangulate and validate a fake signal, giving it an air of legitimacy. The content matters enormously. A simple hello would be suspicious, too vague, too easy to fake. But a message containing mathematical proofs, physical constants, or information about Three-Eye Atlas's composition that we haven't publicly confirmed yet. That would be compelling. Intelligence agencies have access to classified astronomical data. They could include details in the fake message that seem to validate its alien origin. For instance, if the message referenced the exact composition of Three-Eye Atlas's atmosphere, including trace gases like methane or argon at precise concentrations, it would be nearly impossible for the public to dismiss as a hoax. Similarly, if the message contained a mathematical sequence unknown to the general population, but privately decoded by government cryptographers, it would add a layer of credibility that could sway even skeptical scientists. The most dangerous version involves what I'll call the alien mandate gambit. The fabricated message doesn't just establish contact, it explicitly recognizes one nation, one leader, one political system as Earth's legitimate representative. We've observed your civilization. We choose to communicate with Nation X. All other entities should defer to this government in matters concerning our interaction. Imagine the global reaction. The named nation claims validation from a higher cosmic authority. Its geopolitical rivals insist the message is fabricated. Evidence is demanded. Forensic analysis begins. But signal authentication at interstellar distances is nearly impossible. You can't send someone to Three-Eye Atlas to check if it actually transmitted the message. You can't interview the sender. You're stuck analyzing the signal itself, and signals can be spoofed. Other powers will respond predictably. Some will demand independent verification, which can't be provided. Others will launch counterclaims, insisting they received different messages, or that the original was corrupted, or that they have evidence of fabrication. For example, Russia might claim that its own deep space monitoring stations detected anomalies in the signal, suggesting it was artificially generated. Meanwhile, India could assert that its decryption algorithms revealed hidden patterns in the message, implying it was encoded by human intelligence rather than an alien source. These conflicting narratives would further muddy the waters, making it impossible to reach a global consensus. Media in different countries will run completely contradictory narratives. Public opinion will fracture along existing geopolitical divides. Intelligence agencies fear hoaxes more than real contact for exactly this reason. A real alien signal might be ambiguous, difficult to interpret, raising questions we can't immediately answer. But a hoax designed to maximize geopolitical advantage could trigger conflict before anyone proves it's fake. And proving it's fake might take weeks or months, by which time diplomatic damage is done and positions are hardened. The media environment accelerates the problem. Leaked, decoded transcripts appear on social media within hours of the alleged signal. Amateur analysts provide interpretations. Conspiracy theories multiply. Some people believe immediately based on tribal affiliation rather than evidence. Others reject immediately for the same reason. The concept of objective truth, already strained, collapses entirely under the weight of competing narratives. Social media platforms like Twitter and WeChat become battlegrounds for information warfare, with bots and trolls amplifying false narratives to manipulate public opinion. Algorithms designed to maximize engagement further entrench these divisions, pushing users into echo chambers where dissenting views are rarely seen. Religious interpretations add fuel to the fire. Some faiths might see alien endorsement of a particular nation as prophetic fulfillment. Others might view it as demonic deception. Still others might split internally, with different factions reaching opposite conclusions. For example, evangelical Christian groups in the United States might interpret the message as a sign of the end times, while Buddhist leaders in Southeast Asia might see it as a test of humanity's spiritual maturity. These differing interpretations could lead to internal schisms within religious communities, further fragmenting society. The danger of echo chambers becomes existential. Once a group decides they have the truth, either that contact is real or that it's fake, contradictory evidence gets filtered out. Algorithms reinforce existing beliefs. Communities become ideologically sealed. And when reality finally emerges, if it ever does, significant portions of the population simply won't accept it. They've invested too much identity in their chosen narrative. For instance, if a definitive forensic analysis eventually proves the signal was fabricated, supporters of the hoax might dismiss the findings as part of a globalist conspiracy, while opponents might use the revelation to justify preemptive action against perceived enemies. The worst-case outcome is global conflict triggered by a lie. Two nuclear powers, each convinced the other fabricated alien contact for strategic advantage, escalate through diplomatic breakdown, economic warfare, and eventually military confrontation. The aliens, if they exist, return to find a planet fractured by paranoia and mistrust, locked in conflict over a message they never sent. The human cost of such a scenario is unthinkable. Millions of lives lost, cities reduced to ruins, and entire ecosystems devastated by the fallout of nuclear exchange. Yet even this apocalyptic vision pales in comparison to the existential risk posed by the collapse of truth itself. And here's the truly disturbing part. Even if no one fabricates anything, even if every signal is genuine, the mere possibility of fabrication poisons trust so thoroughly that authentic contact becomes indistinguishable from deception. We've created conditions where the truth can't be recognized even when it arrives. But let's pull back from the immediate crisis and look at the bigger picture. Because while we're destroying ourselves over one interstellar object, the cosmos is revealing surprises that put even first contact in broader context. In the vast expanse of the universe, 3Ni Atlas is just one anomaly among countless others. Astronomers have identified thousands of exoplanets, many of which lie within the habitable zones of their stars. The James Webb Space Telescope, launched in 2012 and 2021, has already begun analyzing the atmospheres of these distant worlds, searching for biosignatures that could indicate the presence of life. Meanwhile, the Breakthrough Listen initiative, funded by tech billionaire Yuri Milner, is scanning millions of stars for signs of intelligent civilizations. With each passing year, our technological capabilities expand, bringing us closer to uncovering the truth about whether we are alone in the universe. Yet the irony is that our ability to detect alien life may outpace our capacity to handle the implications. The same tools that allow us to peer deeper into the cosmos also enable us to deceive one another on an unprecedented scale. As we stand on the precipice of cosmic discovery, we must confront the hard truth that our greatest challenge may not be finding extraterrestrial intelligence, but ensuring that our own intelligence doesn't destroy us first. Section 11. The Muon G2. Tension Spike. While we've been focused on 3I Atlas, particle physicists have been quietly freaking out about something else. The muon, a heavier cousin of the electron, has a magnetic property called its magnetic moment. For decades, we've been measuring this property with increasing precision. And for decades, the measurements have refused to match our best theoretical predictions. The Standard Model of Particle Physics, our most successful description of fundamental forces and particles, predicts a specific value for the muon's magnetic moment. We call it G2. The latest experimental results from Fermilab, combined with earlier data from Brookhaven, show a persistent discrepancy. The measured value differs from the predicted value by about 4.2 standard deviations. In particle physics, 5 standard deviations counts as a discovery. We're close. The experiment itself is a masterpiece of precision. At Fermilab's muon campus, physicists create muons by smashing protons into a target, producing showers of particles, including short-lived muons. These muons are injected into a superconducting magnetic storage ring 14 meters in diameter. The magnetic field holds them in circular orbits, while detectors measure how fast their spins precess, how quickly the direction of their magnetic moment rotates relative to their momentum. This precession rate depends on the muon's magnetic moment, and any deviation from predicted values signals new physics. The ring, a marvel of engineering, maintains a uniform magnetic field to within 25 parts per million, ensuring that the muon's orbits remain stable over the microsecond time scales of the experiment. The magnetic field is so precise that even slight variations in temperature or stray magnetic fields from nearby equipment could introduce errors. To combat this, the experiment is housed in a temperature-controlled environment, and the magnetic field is constantly monitored and corrected using a feedback system. The muons themselves are incredibly short-lived, decaying in just 2.2 microseconds. This means that the entire experiment must operate with split-second precision to capture the necessary data before the muons disappear. The measurements are staggeringly precise. We're talking about determining the muon's magnetic moment to better than 1 part per million. That's like measuring the distance from New York to Los Angeles to within a few centimeters. At this level of precision, tiny effects become visible. Virtual particles that pop into and out of existence according to quantum mechanics, contributing fleeting interactions that shift the muon's properties. The Standard Model accounts for these virtual contributions from all known particles and forces, but the measurements persistently show something extra. The Fermilab experiment has now analyzed over 8 billion muon measurements, each one contributing to the statistical power of the result. The combined data from Fermilab and Brookhaven represents the work of hundreds of scientists over more than 2 decades. To put this into perspective, the amount of data generated by these experiments is equivalent to streaming thousands of hours of high-definition video, all of which needs to be meticulously analyzed to extract the relevant signals from the noise. Why does this matter? Because if the discrepancy is real, it means new physics, new particles we haven't discovered, new forces we haven't measured. The Standard Model, for all its success, is incomplete. We've known this for years because the Standard Model doesn't include gravity, doesn't explain dark matter, doesn't account for dark energy. But the muon G2 anomaly suggests that even in the realm where the Standard Model should work perfectly, something is missing. If confirmed, this discrepancy would join a growing list of anomalies, including the proton radius puzzle and the discrepancy in the fine structure constant, that hint at cracks in our understanding of fundamental physics. The proton radius puzzle, for instance, involves a discrepancy between the measured size of the proton using monic hydrogen and the size measured using electron-proton scattering. This discrepancy, though small, has significant implications for our understanding of the atomic nucleus and the forces that bind it together. The fine structure constant, on the other hand, is a fundamental constant that determines the strength of electromagnetic interactions. Measurements of this constant have also shown slight discrepancies, suggesting that our understanding of electromagnetism itself may be incomplete. Candidate explanations include new elementary particles that interact with muons in ways we haven't accounted for, or modifications to quantum field theory itself, or coupling between known particles that's stronger than we thought. Each possibility opens doors to physics we barely understand. One popular hypothesis involves a new particle called a leptoquark, which would couple quarks to leptons in ways the standard model doesn't allow. Leptoquarks appear in various theories beyond the standard model, particularly in grand unified theories that attempt to merge the electromagnetic and nuclear forces. If leptoquarks exist with masses and coupling strengths in the right range, they could generate virtual contributions to the muon's magnetic moment that would explain the discrepancy. But no direct evidence for leptoquarks has been found at particle colliders. They remain theoretical. Researchers have proposed various mechanisms by which leptoquarks could interact with muons, including models where leptoquarks mediate transitions between quarks and leptons, or where leptoquarks contribute to muon decay processes. However, these models are highly speculative and require further experimental validation. Another possibility involves additional Higgs bosons beyond the one discovered in 2012. The standard model includes a single Higgs field responsible for giving particles mass. But many extensions of the model, particularly supersymmetric theories, predict multiple Higgs fields with different properties. Some of these hypothetical Higgs bosons could couple preferentially to muons, creating virtual interactions that shift the magnetic moment. The Large Hadron Collider has searched for additional Higgs bosons in high-energy collisions, but so far, no definitive signal has been found. The muon G2 anomaly provides indirect hints that something like this might exist. Supersymmetric theories, for example, predict the existence of 5 Higgs bosons, each with unique properties and interactions. These additional Higgs bosons could interact with muons in ways that modify their magnetic moment, potentially explaining the observed discrepancy. However, detecting these particles would require colliders with even higher energies than the LHC, or more sensitive precision experiments. The third option is dark sector particles. Maybe there are particles and forces that interact very weakly with standard model particles, just strongly enough to create tiny shifts in precision measurements, but too weakly for direct detection. These dark sector interactions could involve new gauge bosons, particles that mediate forces the way photons mediate electromagnetism, or they could involve portal interactions, specific coupling mechanisms that allow standard model particles to briefly convert into dark sector particles and back. Dark matter, which constitutes about 27% of the universe, could be part of this hidden sector, interacting with normal matter through subtle forces we're only beginning to probe. One intriguing possibility is that dark matter particles could interact with muons through a new force carrier, a dark photon. This interaction, though weak, could create slight shifts in the muon's magnetic moment, potentially explaining the discrepancy. Such interactions would be incredibly difficult to detect directly, as they would occur on timescales much shorter than the lifespan of a muon. However, their cumulative effect could be measurable in precision experiments like those at Fermilab. Now let's connect this to 3I Atlas. If new fundamental forces exist, forces beyond electromagnetism, gravity, and the nuclear forces, then advanced civilizations might exploit those forces for propulsion, communication, or energy generation. Our current rockets burn chemical fuel or use gravity assists because those are the forces we understand. But if hidden sectors of physics exist, sectors involving particles and interactions we're only now glimpsing through precision measurements, then alien technology might operate on principles we can't even detect with current instruments. Imagine a civilization that has harnessed the power of dark sector interactions. Their technology might appear to us as incomprehensible, almost magical, because it operates on principles we haven't discovered. For example, dark matter interactions could enable propulsion systems that generate thrust without visible exhaust, or energy systems that tap into the vast reservoirs of dark energy that permeate the universe. Such technologies would be completely invisible to our current understanding of physics, yet their effects could be profound. Maybe the anomalous behavior of 3I Atlas, the jets that don't quite make sense, the energy budget that seems strained, maybe those aren't violations of physics at all. Maybe they're demonstrations of physics we haven't mastered. Maybe what looks like a comet, behaving weirdly, is actually engineered propulsion, using forces we experience only as faint whispers in particle collider data. The jets, for instance, could be the result of controlled interactions with dark sector particles, creating thrust without the need for visible exhaust. The energy budget might include contributions from vacuum energy, tapped through advanced quantum engineering. Vacuum energy, also known as zero-point energy, is the energy associated with the quantum fluctuations of empty space. If an advanced civilization could harness this energy, it would provide an almost limitless source of power for propulsion, communication, or other technological applications. The challenge lies in controlling these fluctuations, which are incredibly tiny and occur on scales far smaller than the atomic level. However, if such control were possible, it would revolutionize our understanding of energy and propulsion. Consider what mastery of new forces would enable. If you can manipulate interactions beyond the four we currently understand, you open entirely new technological possibilities. Energy extraction from vacuum fluctuations could provide limitless power without environmental impact. Propulsion without reaction mass could enable interstellar travel at speeds we can barely imagine. Communication through channels we can't detect or jam could allow instantaneous transmission of information across cosmic distances. Material properties impossible with current chemistry could lead to structures that defy our understanding of strength and durability. It's not magic, it's just exploiting more of the physical laws that govern reality. For instance, manipulating dark matter interactions could allow for the creation of materials with unprecedented strength and durability. These materials could be used to construct structures that are virtually indestructible, or to build spacecraft capable of withstanding the extreme conditions of interstellar travel. Similarly, harnessing vacuum energy could enable the development of propulsion systems that generate thrust without the need for reaction mass, allowing for faster and more efficient travel through space. An interstellar probe, designed by a civilization that understands these extended physics, might look exactly like 3I Atlas appears to us, a comet-like object with behavior that doesn't quite fit natural models. The carbon dioxide coma could be deliberate camouflage, making the probe resemble a natural solar system comet to any casual observer. The jets could be subtle course corrections using exotic propulsion that leaks some observable effects, but hides its fundamental mechanism. The thermal and spectroscopic signatures we measure might be side effects of technology operating on principles we lack the physics to comprehend. For example, the probe's surface might be coated with materials that interact with dark sector particles, creating a thermal signature that defies conventional explanation. These materials could absorb and emit energy in ways that are invisible to our current instruments, yet their effects would be measurable in the form of thermal anomalies. Similarly, the spectroscopic signatures could reveal the presence of exotic elements or compounds that are stable only under the influence of new forces. This possibility is genuinely unsettling. It means that even if we intercept alien transmissions, even if we recover alien artifacts, we might lack the fundamental physics knowledge to understand what we're looking at. Imagine finding a working smartphone in the Bronze Age. You could study it for centuries without grasping semiconductor physics, electromagnetic waves, or quantum mechanics. The gap between your understanding and the device's operation would be unbridgeable. Bronze Age humans would see a flat rectangle that occasionally glows with colored lights. They might notice it responds to touch. They might observe that it gets warm. But the actual mechanisms, the integrated circuits processing billions of transistor operations per second, the radio waves connecting to cell towers, the quantum tunneling effects in the flash memory, all of that would be completely invisible to their conceptual framework. They don't have the mathematics to describe it. They don't have the experimental tools to measure it. They don't even have the vocabulary to ask the right questions. Humanity might be in that position relative to alien technology. We might be Bronze Age humans, staring at smartphones, convinced we understand matter and energy because we've mastered fire, completely unaware that the universe operates on principles we haven't imagined. The gap might be even worse than the smartphone analogy suggests. At least Bronze Age humans and modern humans share the same fundamental physics. The smartphone operates on principles that exist in the Bronze Age world, just undiscovered. But if alien technology uses forces and particles beyond the standard model, then it's not just that we haven't discovered the relevant physics. It's that the evidence for that physics is so subtle, requiring such precision measurements in such carefully controlled conditions, that naturally occurring phenomena never demonstrate it clearly. You need particle colliders and superconducting magnets and measurements precise to parts per million before the hints even appear. For example, the effects of dark sector interactions might only be detectable in highly controlled laboratory conditions, using equipment sensitive enough to measure effects on the scale of individual particles. Without such technology, these interactions would remain completely invisible to us, yet they could form the basis of advanced alien technologies. The implications for first contact are profound. If we can't understand alien physics, can we understand alien communication? Can we negotiate? Can we avoid misunderstandings that lead to conflict? Or are we fundamentally handicapped, trying to engage in conversations where half the vocabulary refers to concepts we don't possess? Language translation assumes shared concepts mapped to different words. You can translate water between languages because both cultures know water. But how do you translate a concept that only exists in extended physics you don't possess? If an alien civilization talks about manipulating dark sector interactions or exploiting beyond standard model forces, we don't just lack the words, we lack the underlying understanding those words would reference. Misunderstandings become inevitable and potentially catastrophic. We might interpret offers of technological assistance as threats because we don't understand what's being offered. We might violate safety protocols we don't know exist, because the physics underlying those protocols is invisible to us. We might make agreements we can't honor, because we don't realize the commitments require capabilities we lack. For example, an alien civilization might offer to share technology that harnesses vacuum energy, but if we lack the understanding of how to control quantum fluctuations, we might misinterpret the offer as a threat or an attempt to deceive us. Similarly, we might unintentionally violate safety protocols designed to protect against dark matter interactions, leading to unforeseen consequences. Recent 2025 experimental results have only deepened the muon G2 tension, improved measurements, better theoretical calculations, and continued discrepancy. The particle physics community is divided between excitement and caution. Some researchers are confident new physics is knocking on the door. Others suspect unaccounted systematic errors. Either way, the door is opening. The theoretical calculations have improved alongside the experiments. Computing the standard model prediction for the muon's magnetic moment requires summing contributions from every possible virtual particle interaction. Some of these calculations involve evaluating integrals with millions of terms, requiring supercomputers running for months. Theorists have refined these calculations, reduced uncertainties, and the discrepancy persists. That strengthens the case that this is real new physics rather than computational error. But the systematic error possibility remains. Precision experiments are devilishly difficult. Stray magnetic fields, temperature variations, alignment imperfections, any of dozens of subtle effects could bias measurements. Experimentalists at Fermilab have spent years hunting for and eliminating systematic errors. They've cross-checked results using multiple independent analysis methods. They've compared against the earlier Brookhaven experiment, which used different equipment and techniques. The consistency is encouraging, but not yet definitive. Despite these efforts, the possibility of unaccounted systematic errors remains a concern. Researchers are now exploring new techniques to further reduce these errors, including the use of advanced machine learning algorithms to analyze data and identify potential biases. Additionally, new experiments are being proposed that would use entirely different methods to measure the muon's magnetic moment, providing independent verification of the results. Funding for beyond standard model research has increased. New colliders are proposed. Precision measurement facilities expand. Governments that normally fight over defense budgets suddenly find money for fundamental physics. Why? Because the nation that unlocks new forces first gains advantages that dwarf conventional military superiority. Energy, propulsion, computation, material science, all of it could leap forward if we access physics currently hidden from us. China has announced plans for a circular electron-positron collider that would enable precision measurements complementing Fermilab's muon work. Europe is designing detector upgrades for the Large Hadron Collider to search for new particles at higher energies. The United States is funding multiple beyond standard model experimental programs. Japan is developing next-generation neutrino experiments that might reveal unexpected interactions. The global investment in fundamental physics has reached levels not seen since the Cold War era, when particle physics was considered strategically important. For example, the United States has allocated billions of dollars to the construction of new particle accelerators and precision measurement facilities, with the goal of probing the fundamental laws of nature at unprecedented levels of accuracy. Similarly, Europe is investing heavily in the development of advanced detectors for the Large Hadron Collider, which will allow physicists to search for new particles and interactions at higher energies than ever before. These investments reflect a growing recognition that fundamental physics research is not just an academic pursuit, but a strategic imperative with the potential to transform technology, economics, and geopolitics. And if 3i Atlas carries information intentionally or unintentionally about those hidden sectors, then whoever extracts that information inherits the future, not just geopolitical dominance for a generation, but technological supremacy that might last centuries. Imagine an alien data transmission that includes a roadmap to beyond standard model physics. Not complete theories, but hints, suggestions about which energy scales to probe, which coupling mechanisms to investigate, which symmetries might be broken in ways we haven't considered. Even fragmentary information could accelerate human physics research by decades. And the nation that decodes that information first, that builds the experiment suggested by alien knowledge, that discovers the new forces and particles before competitors, would gain advantages almost impossible to quantify. The economic implications alone are staggering. New energy sources could transform industries, create entirely new markets, and render obsolete technologies that currently dominate the global economy. The geopolitical landscape would shift overnight, with nations that master these new forces rising to dominance, while others fall behind. For instance, a nation that discovers how to harness vacuum energy could revolutionize its energy infrastructure, creating limitless power without environmental impact. This would not only transform its economy, but also give it a strategic advantage over nations still reliant on fossil fuels or nuclear power. Similarly, new propulsion technologies based on dark sector interactions could enable interstellar travel, allowing for the exploration and colonization of distant star systems. This would open up new frontiers for resource extraction, scientific research, and human habitation, further enhancing the nation's economic and geopolitical standing. The philosophical weight is crushing. We think we understand the universe because we've built impressive machines and elegant theories, but our understanding might be a tiny island in an ocean of ignorance. First contact could be the moment we're forced to confront that ignorance, not theoretically, not academically, but practically. An alien intelligence might operate on principles we don't possess vocabulary to describe. Communication might require not just translation, but conceptual expansion beyond anything our species has achieved. And that brings us full circle back to the central question. Are we ready? Not militarily. We've covered that. Not politically. That's clearly no. But philosophically, spiritually, intellectually, are we ready to discover that reality is stranger, larger, more complex than we imagined? Are we ready to be small again, students rather than masters, children in a cosmos that's older and wiser than we can grasp? For example, if an alien civilization communicates using concepts based on dark sector interactions or beyond standard model forces, we might struggle to understand even the most basic aspects of their message. This would require not just linguistic translation, but a fundamental rethinking of our understanding of physics and reality. It would challenge our most deeply held assumptions about the nature of the universe and our place within it. December 19th is coming. 3i Atlas will make its closest approach to Earth's orbit and continue outbound, either as a comet or a probe or something we don't have words for yet. What happens next depends entirely on us, on whether we choose unity or division, trust or paranoia, wisdom or fear. The biggest threat to humanity, encountering alien intelligence, isn't the alien. It's never been the alien. It's us. Our inability to cooperate, our refusal to trust, our desperate need to win, to dominate, to control, even when control means destroying the very thing we're fighting over. If 3i Atlas is listening,